In the early days of the internet, radical libertarians were scattered, lonely, and faceless. Without direction, they resigned to scour the web, sifting through content providers in a wasteland plagued by YouTube demonetization, Facebook jail, and covert internet censorship. But then, in 2017, the Libertarian Union was formed. Finally, the average Joe libertarian could find a thriving community of independent podcasters and content providers, all in one convenient location. At Libertarian Union, we'll always have the latest news, interviews, discussions, and even movie reviews. With hundreds of episodes and more added all the time, you'll always find something fresh at libertarianunion.com.
Hey everyone, it's Daniel and Robert, the Last Nighters, which is on the Launchpad Media, where they're always launching new ideas in your direction. So do check that out at thelaunchpadmedia.com. And tonight we're going to be talking about V for Vendetta. This is episode 44 of the show, and you can find the show notes and more at lastnighters.com/44. We also have a special guest, and we will introduce him in a moment. But let's say hello to Robert, and then we'll get into the guest, and then into the Google description, and then into the show.
What's up, so you sexy peoples? Thanks for tuning in for another episode of The Last Nighters. We got a special one for you. Check it out.
Yes, we're very excited to have along the ride with us is Jay of AnarchoCoffee, and he is slinging beans for you all. And you can find his beans, roasted beans, at anarchocoffee.com. Take it away, Jay.
Hey guys, what's up? My name is Jay from anarchocoffee.com. We make self-governing caffeine for libertarians, agorists, voluntarists, and caps, and really anybody who enjoys a mean fresh brew of coffee.
All right. And you reached out to me on the Twitter because we have on there a little note that says, hey, if you're interested in being a guest, hit us up. And you did. So I appreciate that. And then during our back and forth, you actually brought up this movie as one that you were potentially interested in without knowing that it was, in fact, the next movie we were going to talk about. So I'm really excited because this is one that you wanted to do, and just so happens that we were ready to do it. So here we are. Let's get into it. We usually start with the Google description, and here it is. V for Vendetta came out 2005, mystery thriller, 2 hours and 13 minutes, 8.2 on the IMDb, 73% Rotten Tomatoes, 62% Metacritic, yet 93% of Google users liked it. The description is, following World War, London is a police state occupied by a fascist government, and a vigilante known as V, played by Hugo Weaving, uses terrorist tactics to fight the oppressors of the world in which he now lives. When V saves a young woman named Evie, played by Natalie Portman, from the secret police, he discovers an ally in his fight against England's oppressors. Came out March 17, 2006. James McTeague is the director. I'm not sure if I'm saying the name right, but the screenplay is by the Wachowskis, who are of the Matrix fame. So, Robert, let's get your take on the Google description, and then we will pass it over to Jay. Pass that Java over to Jay.
Well, that was all fairly correct. I think the Wachowskis now identify as other genders these days, but this is back in the time when they were their original genders, like OG gender.
And you know what? I think in the credits it says the Wachowski brothers.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, so it's bizarre, but okay.
But this is a comic book movie, for those of you who don't know. This is adapted from a work by Alan Moore, who famously hates all his comic book adaptations. And so his name does not appear in the credits. It's actually just, it says based on a comic book drawn by, and then it just gives you the artist. But Alan Moore is a kind of a famous socialist type guy, but he's also he's like a recluse, kind of just an angry old man style dude too. But yeah, I don't know how he actually thought about this movie, but it seems like, I mean, if he was an angry socialist, like a lot of Antifas are, you think they might, I don't know, appreciate this kind of a movie? Because it seems like they're battling against a fascist government. They would have all kinds of things to be upset about. And they put on masks and they go around and attack things. They don't smash up Starbucks. V is actually a little more refined than that. He has a specific set of people who have wronged him, and he is seeking justice against those people. But then he's also seeking to blow up a building, and that sounds like something Antifa would be interested in. I don't know, Jay, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I actually watched the movie twice before before the show, and the one thing that kept sticking with me was the non-aggression principle, I guess. Being an ANCAP, and although I mean I love the idea of blowing up government, but I just keep going back to kind of the peace, tolerance, and non-aggression principle. And I think there are ways to separate from the government other than through violence. Although sometimes violence is a necessity.
Yeah, it seems like V has this idea that blowing up Parliament will incite this greater movement to begin that will essentially be a revolution. It seems to me that he's trying to incite a revolution as opposed to some sort of movement away from government, just, leaving. Like, I would advocate, you don't want to be a part of something. You don't want to be around these violent thugs. You disagree with what they do. You would just withdraw, and you would withdraw your support, and you would leave, and you'd be like, hey, everybody, you don't need to be a part of this. This is all horrific. You don't need to just stop supporting them, stop sending in tax money, that kind of thing. But instead, he wants to blow up this Parliament building, which, since the entire movie, everybody in the movie seems to understand that the government loves the fear. They love the idea of there being a terrorist, and they're like, we're going to protect you from the terrorists. We're going to protect you from the threats. Right. And then the people go, yes, please, government, protect us from all the threats. We need you. You're our only stop against chaos. You're the best. Keep it up no matter what you got to do. Sweet. I don't know if blowing up a Parliament building, it sure seems like a terrorist act that,
Yeah.
They could go, look at this, violence by these terrorists blowing up Parliament buildings. I mean, maybe when everybody is supporting the blowing up of I don't know. It's kind of a confused message to me. Daniel, do you have some thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like blowing it up would just play right into their hands. I mean, they've already demonstrated their capacity for instilling fear into people. And it's later revealed that they've perpetrated a lot of false flags that have been catalyzing events in order to implement more of their police state measures, like curfews and a lot of controls that they are putting in place. And V points out to them during his address that they asked for these things. It's very similar to Fahrenheit 451, where the people demanded to be protected from ideas. And so the literature and all the arts and media and all of those things were very restricted. And that was kind of happening here as well, where they were taking away artwork and the Quran and anything that had anything that would elicit imagination or ideas. Like, they had to have these people conform to this and be these like little safe sheep shepherded by these very violent people. And I guess I don't see how blowing up the building is going to be that liberating event when it's just going to give the government more incentive and more play to say, hey, look, now we're under threat. Now we need to implement even more draconian stuff. And you will probably agree with us, right? Though, to your point, you had said that it seemed like a lot of the people watching the media were often calling it out like, oh, this is horseshit. Like, right. They didn't believe the media. And I don't know, my viewing of this, and I was also seeing recent comments like on Amazon, like, oh, I just watched this and it's so much more relevant today with Trump in office.
That was a talking point that we were going to get to, because they seemed like there's some parallels I was wondering if some Antifa types could draw some parallels there, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I can totally see a very leftist interpretation of this, and it probably was left in its origin. Like you were saying, Alan Moore is a socialist. And
right, although it was written back in the 80s, and Margaret Thatcher was the main target back then. But
okay, all right. Well, that sort of lines up, because she was viewed as very, the Iron Lady, right? Like, very right-wing totalitarian, almost totalitarian light.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that people viewing this now are thinking that, oh, this is like exactly what we need to do. We need to resist Trump violently if need be. Like, this is almost giving the okay to go out and punch people.
Right. It's kind of a training manual for Antifa. I don't know. Although I think V does actually have, legitimate complaints. Like, I don't know if I would support him in his, basically murdering people. But I mean, what do you guys think about that? He was imprisoned and then did medical testing on him, and then, he fought back and eventually burned the place down, and then, comes back and gets justice on these main characters throughout the movie.
So it's Deadpool.
Yeah. So what did you feel? Did you ever feel he was aggressing against any of those people, or did you feel that he was, fully just acting within justice?
Jay, you want to field that one? Because you had some of the NAP questions at the beginning here.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a coin cost for me, because I think he was within full reins of justice because of the imprisonment and torture of him as a human being. But at the same time, did he have go as far as doing not necessarily torture, but basically murdering the guys that tortured him and imprisoned him? This eye for an eye thing. I'm a big believer in that. I think, but I don't know if he had to blow up Parliament. Did he have to go that far? Because then to your point, it's an act of terrorism, and it goes against this idea of non-aggression.
Yeah, I guess V kind of stands. He's been used by various people. I first, I think, ran into him when I was kind of listening to Alex Jones, and he would talk about ideas are bulletproof and really really talk up V for Vendetta as this kind of inspirational movie for him. But Alex Jones is very much a statist. He's like a kind of libertarian, paleo-conservative kind of like guy. And
just reset.
He's Mr. Reset. 1776. The answer to 1984 is 1776 is his famous slogan. And I would also tend to agree that V is not the anarchist symbol that I think maybe Antifa would want. I think he is more of a statist. I don't think he's really, inspiring people to walk away from tyranny. He's like, well, you're just doing it wrong. You're doing government wrong. So I would say he's a revolutionary, and inside the heart of every revolutionary is a bureaucrat waiting to get out. So just waiting for their turn at the controls to just do it better than the guy beforehand. So I see him. Yeah, I'm with him on the justice part, but I do not endorse his, revolution and let's do the government right this time. Rah.
Right. His famous line in this is that the government should be afraid of the people, not the other way around.
Yes.
And yeah, it's just basically saying, oh, you're doing government wrong. We need a revolution to have a government of the people that's more responsive to the people. And I think that this ties up to a lot of statists who think they're resisting Trump, that they think they want. They think that they want more democratic control over our politicians, when they don't seem to realize or make the connection that thread is so tenuous and so thin. Like, you're voting one way or the other really doesn't matter. They don't really care. And they lie for a living, right? To get you to vote for them. They always go back on their promises anyway. And so I think Robert, you're right that he just wants to institute his own form of government, or a revolutionary government. This seems very French Revolution to me, where they just want to throw out the bad government and put in their good government,
which instantly turns to shit.
Yeah,
a whole bunch more people.
Becomes even worse. But I wanted to ask you, and I'll start with Robert. Regarding his redistributive justice, like his retribution against the people who had wronged him, I was okay with a lot of them because they were still doing bad shit, a lot of these people. But the female doctor who had good intentions and inadvertently, went along with this stuff, and then, he actually talked with her and was like, she was apologizing, but he had already poisoned her. That one got to me a little bit, because I was like, well, she had good intentions, didn't mean to do you harm. She was part of this apparatus, and she happened to do harm, but it's not like she had ill will in her heart, no malice, no intent to do harm. So I was a little bit torn on that one. What do you think of that?
Well, I really liked V's line in that scene, and I wrote it down because, she wasn't going to continue on to do more things. You're right. She was probably done with all that, and she had moved on to a different phase of her life. But that doesn't absolve her for what she did. And also, his line is, I haven't come for what you hoped to do, only for what you did. So I don't care what your intentions were. I don't care if you intended to cure cancer. You tortured and killed a whole bunch of people. I'm sure Hitler had great intentions to create a 1,000-year Reich and make a wonderful fatherland that everybody could be happy in. But that he achieved it by killing a whole lot of people. Same with Mao and Stalin. These great societies are always built on the corpses of piles and piles of millions of people. So I don't care what your intentions are. It really matters what your methods are and what you do. So yeah, I understand that she wasn't a threat to anybody anymore. But I mean, what's the what's the cutoff date on justice?
The statute of limitations? Yeah, I don't know.
What's your statute of limitations on justice, Daniel?
Well, apparently it's 37 years, and you need 1024th level of evidence to do a callback to one of our previous shows. The thing I was curious about was it seemed like V initially, when he defended Natalie Portman from the Fingermen, she was willing to defend herself, and then they say to her, "Oh, we're Fingermen, we're cops, basically." And she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know." But I mean, she was still totally within her rights to defend herself. Just because they happen to be part of the Gestapo, doesn't mean that she shouldn't be able to defend herself. But
she starts bootlicking immediately as soon as she finds out that they're government people.
Right. But even when V comes in to save the day, I don't think he kills those guys. I think he just incapacitates them, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. He only knocks them out.
And those ones I would have been fine with, because I mean, they were going to kill her. They were going to rape her and then kill her. And they made a weird, like, pedophile type reference. They're like, what do they say to her? Like,
I don't remember. Sorry.
I forget. But there were a couple of references in this movie. One was in that scene, and then the other was with the priest.
Yes. Yeah. The one, both of those references were very creepy.
Yeah, and then there was like another thing in here that was kind of weird. Trying to remember what it was. Well, it'll come to me at some point. But back to people thinking of this as present day and resisting Trump and all of that. But in this movie, the government had the media in their back pocket, and that's how it kind of used to be here, especially during the Obama years and whatnot. They were just total lapdogs for whatever he wanted to do. But now they are also resisting Trump, but they're doing it all for kind of BS reasons instead of legitimate reasons. And I wonder if that's because all the legitimate stuff would expose them for all the stuff that they gave Obama a pass for previously. So their only option remaining is to pick up on him making fun of people or being mean. And they have to go after him on those things because they're the only things left that won't expose them for the hypocrites that they are. Not that anyone would really notice, but does that kind of make sense?
That mostly makes sense, although they did go after him for the migrant stuff, which had been continuing under Obama for, and long before that. But I agree with you that he's just continuing the wars that the media was completely silent about all through Obama's term.
Yeah.
Right. And then a lot of the migrant stuff was happening under Obama, and Obama was doing more stuff against it than Trump's even alluded to doing. And then
more deportations.
And then the media gets upset. Right. And so it just seems like really bizarre. Like that left cover really allows you to get away with even worse stuff.
It sure does.
Yeah.
Note to all tyrants.
Yeah. The other thing that I couldn't think of too, when you're talking about the comparison of this film and the left, is the anonymous movement, right? So we had the whole anonymous movement back in, what was it, 08, 09 during the recession.
Right. And were they related to the Occupy Wall Street stuff, or was that kind of separate?
It was. Yeah, no, if I remember correctly, like the anonymous movement was related to the Occupy Wall Street, and a lot of those guys wore the Guy Fawkes masks. So it definitely has this kind of tip of the hat to left-winging ideology a little bit, which is unfortunate because I think I see the Guy Fawkes masks as more of an anarchist than I do as this left-winging, liberal.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Although it seems like most groups who see him as a revolutionary or a resistor, they want to latch on to that. Like, I don't think most people who wear a Che Guevara T-shirt understand the horrific things that he did.
Yeah, that was the other one I was thinking of. Yeah. When you were talking about the revolution, because everybody thought Che was a revolutionist, but the horrible things that he did to get into power and create his dream of what a government should be. Yeah.
Always ends in a lot of dead bodies.
Always does.
Right. Oh, and I remember the reference that the finger lickers, Fingermen gave to Natalie Portman.
I like finger lickers better.
They said, "Spare the rod, spoil the child." when they were about to rape her. So,
that's disgusting. And
right.
the guy, the character who was playing the guys that were raping her, it was so disgusting.
Yeah, and the priest later on, yeah, super creepy.
Yeah, very creepy.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask, and I'll go to you, Jay, on this one. When V escapes from the television studio after playing his message of hate, broadcasting the message of hate, which is what they all label it as, even though it seemed very tame to me, the message that he sent out, very reasonable, in fact.
Yeah.
But you say something like, it's okay to be white, and that's labeled as hate speech now. So who knows, right? But and feel free to jump back onto this portion of this question. But the main question I wanted to ask is, after he saves her from the broadcast studio and takes her to his house, he says to her, "I need to keep you here for a year." And is that like an imprisonment that's okay, or is he violating her rights in some way? Like, because if she goes out back into the world, she's gonna probably get killed, right? So he's trying to protect her, but also protect his mission. So feel free to jump on any of that.
Yeah, so definitely violating her rights. I mean, nobody should have any right to withhold anybody for any reasoning. So there's that. And yeah, I mean, I think the option there should have been, maybe you may go, but sign this agreement that, you can't talk about my revolution or something. But yeah, and then your comment about, the whole white privilege thing, very, I've worked in some places where if you said that, you were labeled racist, or you don't understand what white privilege means. And I can only think about my own experiences, which is nobody ever gave me anything, and I had to work for everything that I have today. So I don't know where you think the white privilege thing comes in.
Yeah, and the message was apparently at some campuses, a simple piece of paper that says "It's okay to be white" had been posted up, like on telephone poles and whatnot, and that's being labeled as white supremacist hate speech.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's currently going down in Australia. Although it was doing this, that was making the rounds in like universities, like last fall. But
yeah, but I guess my point is, and Robert, you can jump from this.
Maybe I will.
That people looking at this movie as present day, they're probably missing that connection where in the movie they label V's message as hate speech, as a message of hate. But these very same people who identify with this movie as resisting Trump and are rah 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 are the very same people who are looking at messages that are like "it's okay to be white" and labeling those as hate speech, labeling any conservative thought as Nazis, as white supremacists, as dog whistlers. So it's really bizarre, right? Because in that aspect of this movie, they are the perpetrators of what's represented here.
Right, and this is the anti-fascists acting like fascists. This is the people who are quick to point out other people having differing views as hate speech. So yeah, how would they react to this movie? Would they see it as problematic that the government is labeling V's speech as hate speech? Because that's what they call everything else. So I don't know. I think they take some good with some bad. Probably they think of this movie. I do want to talk a little bit about later on, after V imprisons Evie, then he rescues her from the cops when they break into the TV show guy's apartment.
Gordon,
yeah. Then he subjects her to all kinds of torture to, break her of what was it? What he wanted to do? Break her of, not caring anymore, like just going beyond, not having anything else to lose.
Right? Yeah, where she's willing to die.
Right, and that's enough. Yeah, and that's another case of I don't care about your intentions. You got me on your side. Good job. You tortured me. I don't know. It makes sense inside the movie, but I think V is acting absolutely in the wrong here.
Right, and this ties into his idea where violence can be used for good, and he says justice. And I think that in a very narrow aspect, yes, that's true. But I'm thinking more in self-defense or in righting a wrong versus how he's using it. And he's using it more in the social justice aspect of it. And I think that's
the means justify the end, or the ends justify the means. Sorry. So he's justifying his in the torture scenario for his greater good society that he wants to build. He's doing the same thing that the government people do.
Right. And I think that's kind of a dangerous message for somebody who's going to identify with this movie. And I don't want to mean like, it should be like censored or anything like that. But what I mean is someone might watch this who thinks they're a resistor, never Trumper or whatever, and see violence being advocated for when it's used for good, when it's used for justice. And they think they are doing justice. They think they are doing good by fighting fascists and fighting hate, but they're employing the tactics of hate and fascism in order to do it. And
right. Which is why they call hate speech aggression. So then they're justified in violently attacking you and calling it self-defense.
Right, because they think they're being just.
Right.
And it's a confusion. I mean, they're perverting so many words and getting themselves into a pretzel to even get into this position to where words are now violence. But I think they feel totally justified in their actions as a result of this.
Yeah, and when she's locked up, or when V's got EV locked up, I just kind of feel like it's almost like this brainwashing or propaganda to get her to get on his side to view the way he views the world.
Right.
Which again is this whole aggression, right? Or this violent act. Believe the way I believe, or else this is going to happen to you.
Yeah, and man, I still like the movie a lot.
Yes.
I do. I think it's a cool, important type of work, but I'm glad we're having this discussion about it, and it could only have that discussion if it exists. So I'm glad it got made, but it's definitely got lots of issues in terms of kind of a pure philosophy type thing. Because when you fight monsters, you be careful not to become a monster yourself. And there's even a line in the movie that, you've become a monster because I fought monsters and they made me a monster. But then the movie kind of ends as a justification of his philosophy. I don't know. Do you think that the movie's claim that it's making is that V's world is going to be better than the previous, no matter how it's built?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe we need a V for Vendetta too, to see how that plays out.
Yeah, and just have it be another cycle, just a reset.
A reset.
You can't solve a problem with the same mentality that caused the problem in the first place, and it just seems to be that they're using the same mentality as the government people. So,
right. Well, going back to what you were saying, right? I mean, it's this idea of like bodies on top of bodies, right, to create this governing body, and which thinking as a anarcho-capitalist, why do we even need government? Why can't it just be,
Right. Yeah. V doesn't want no government. He wants a just government. And if I could take him by the shoulders and shake him, I'd tell him that never in the history of mankind has there ever been such a thing.
Yeah,
There's no such thing as a just government.
Yeah, he's like an anti-authoritarian whilst advocating for his own dictatorship. So it's kind of bizarre.
Yeah.
But I wanted to bring up Evie's parents, because the inspectors who are like trying to track her down, when they start talking about the things that happened to her family, they start thinking, oh, this is like, she's even more dangerous because her parents were like activists or something like that. And they were taken from her when she was 12. But they had a line in their flashback where they said that if they left the country, then the government wins because they're not there to resist or there to fight that government. And I don't know about you guys, but like if things start getting like bad enough, I'm out. Like I don't need to stick around You're
not going to be the captain of the ship going down with it?
Right. I mean, imagine being in Germany and, being Jewish in Germany in 1932, right? And you're seeing the writing on the wall.
Yeah. And what did the people who stuck around get?
Right.
Free gas, right? That's a terrible joke. But well, it's not even a joke. But I mean, they got gassed, right? They got murdered. So I mean, you see that freight train coming down the pike. Are you going to just stand there in the middle of the tracks, or are you going to get out of the way?
Yeah, I mean, if I had the means, I'd get out because we've mentioned this in previous episodes. But when a government gets tyrannical like this, one of the first things they do is they control the weapons. And they control movement, and only approved people or people with the connections and the money can get out. But yeah, they really restrict those sorts of things because, restricting freedom is really bad on the economy. So yeah, it's not good unless you can keep everybody still in there because yeah, people will people tend to move towards freedom. They move towards economic opportunity. Throughout human history, they've always gone to new areas, new lands to settle, go where there's opportunity. There's a reason why people make milk carton rafts to get to the United States, not from the United States to get to the magical worlds of Venezuela and Cuba.
Well, not yet. Oh man. So back to the bishop guy. He was under surveillance, and the cops, or the fingermen, were listening to his encounter with Evie, dressed up as like a young prostitute, right?
Yep.
So they were totally aware that this was going on and had been going on with probably younger kids previously, and yet they were totally cool with it, right? Like they were. I don't even know why he was under surveillance. He was one of the kingpins in the party, right?
Right.
Was it just a matter of everyone's under surveillance at all times?
I think that's what it was. It was like a mix of 1984. Yeah, everyone's under surveillance all the time. But since you're a member of the party or a high-ranking member of the party, you get to do whatever you want, essentially.
Oh, you get a pass.
That's accurate for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, let's not talk about another movie, but the movie Spotlight and the Boston Journal exposing all of the Catholic priests and how they moved them around to hide the fact that there was this child molestation going on, right? So the higher power, the more power you have, the more stuff you get away with, right? And a quote from one of my favorite books, right? Prince, power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yeah, and these organizations, will protect their own and allow that sort of behavior to continue all the time. And you'll see it within the Catholic Church, these old institutions, and you'll see it in these massively, how many people did Bill Clinton rape? I don't know. High-ranking party members get to do essentially whatever they want, kill whoever they want, and say that they're an enemy of the party. Oh, they're an enemy of the state. Yeah. And who's going to stop them? Everybody underneath them is terrified of them because they're willing to use violence at the drop of a hat. Joe Stalin threatened his own family and sent a bunch of them to the gulag. So even they weren't, immune from speaking their mind or being able to speak their mind around the guy.
Right. And that reminds me of that Gordon character who made fun of the party leader. I forget his name. Was he a chancellor? Was that who he was?
Yeah. I forget his name, but yeah, something chancellor. And he was, that's right. He was kind of like this late night show Jimmy Fallon guy who made fun of the leader, and very next day gets his door kicked in by the very government he was making fun of, and who knows where he got sent off and what happened to him, but I can only imagine.
Yeah, V said that they killed him because they found the Quran that he had.
Yeah.
So had they not found that, it would have just been imprisonment.
No, maybe not, right? Because he was also a homosexual. So they also were against any other religions and homosexuality as well.
Right, and I could see people likening this, to present day as that being an anti-Trump thing. Though, as far as I know, he hasn't done anything that's anti-gay, has he?
He's actually the very first president ever to run on a gay marriage being legal platform. Obama in his first term was not for it.
Right, and Hillary wasn't back then either.
Hillary wasn't. Yeah. As soon as public opinion topped over 51%, then all of a sudden the politicians totally believed in it 100%. But before that, they were totally against it. It was man and a woman, and that's the way God wants it, and blah, blah, blah.
Right, and that was back when this movie was made, right? When Obama and Hillary were making comments like that. And,
yeah, this is what, 07?
06, yeah. So I think Obama was just a little bit after that in the public eye, really. But this kind of ties back to that long-running cultural commentary that you and I have talked about many times on the show in the past, where they introduce ideas in entertainment first, and then it kind of gets people get acclimated to that idea, and then it gets introduced in politics, and then it becomes mainstream acceptable. And there's an example of that in this movie with with Gordon being a gay character, but also the note that Evie reads. It's from a girl who grew up liking another girl, and then that relationship broke up, and that school girlfriend went back and married a man. But then the original girl who was imprisoned here got into other lesbian relationships, and then the government, because she was a homosexual, separated her and captured her, put her in this prison. And I'm just wondering if that was like at the time that this movie was made, and I don't know if this was part of the comic or not from back in the 80s, but if that was intentionally in there to help promote that in a cultural way, if you follow what I'm saying. Like,
I believe I also don't know if it's in the original comic book or not. I would guess not. I would guess that was an issue very much of the time. And yeah, as a way to promote that through the culture. That's my guess. Is that the writer of the screenplay, the Wachowskis, were very much like, hey, let's introduce this. This is kind of the time. This is a pressing issue that we care about. Let's do this right now and add this in. And this kind of makes sense. And we'll make the horrific fascist government also anti-gay.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Wait,
the being
what?
gay part. not the fascist government going after them.
You're pro-fascist government now, Daniel? I knew it. You son of a bitch.
You got me. You know, it's funny. You get into these debates with people and you talk to them about the free market and they think that you're a fascist because of that. And I'm like talking about voluntary, consensual interactions with people, and that's somehow fascism now. It's so
I don't know
crazy.
what you just said. All I heard was a bunch of misogynistic, homophobic crap.
A bunch of hate speech.
Hate speech. Yep.
All right. Robert, you said you had a bunch of notes, so why don't you hit your next big one, and then we'll start to close out the show. We're getting close to the end point of the Last Nighter show.
Well, one thing that stuck out to me, and this isn't the biggest of deals, but I thought it was strange when, in the very beginning, V blows up the Old Bailey. And I thought, and because it had been a while since I've watched the movie, and I didn't remember exactly what happened, that the government would immediately out, some terrorist as being the culprit, and that everybody should be afraid and give them more power because that's the theme of the movie. But in the beginning, the government's like, oh no, we are going to blow up the Old Bailey anyway, and someone just beat us to it, and we don't know what the fireworks are all about. That was kind of like weird. So it seemed like an opportunity for the government to, really jump on the old fear train and play it up for more power, but it didn't happen that way. And it just stuck out because the rest of the movie is consistently about that. Everything else V does, it's like, oh my God, the big terrorist V, he's the worst thing ever, and you need to be afraid of him.
Yeah, it's like he's giving them the villain they need on a silver platter. Like, government always needs something to make the people afraid of.
Right. No matter what it is, it's got to be something. You have to be afraid, and they are the solution to it.
Right. Yeah. So like once Russia was, once the USSR dissolved, then it was like what, the war on drugs or Saddam Hussein or something.
Right. Then it was Middle Easterners.
Yeah. So yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. What do you think, Jay?
Yeah. There's a lot to digest there, but I keep thinking about actually when towards the beginning of the movie, when the act happened of blowing up the first building there, the chancellor would ask, what do you guys hear on the radio? What do you hear? What are the people thinking? Right. So the act of spying, and what are they at? And there's this chatter of this, revolutionary character V, and the chancellor's like, we have to put it into this right now. Right. And so more propaganda on the mainstream media outlets, right, in the movie.
Yeah, that was another thing that I thought was weird, was that they announced that he was dead at one point.
Yeah.
It's like, why would you want to do that? That just ends the story. That just ends everything. And then you look like a fool later when he turns up alive. So you want to keep the fear going, make him build him up into this big boogeyman.
Well, maybe they were afraid that his message was getting out because like he made the point, and maybe that's what the movie was trying to follow, was that the buildings that he's destroying are built and they say something. They are a symbol of something. And so is their destruction.
Well, remember, sorry, I'm not going to go off what you're saying. I'm going to continue my thought because I'm a terrible, selfish piece of shit. But remember with Osama bin Laden, and he was the big bad boogeyman. And, he never had like a message to the people of the United States. We never really got to know what his griefs or what he was upset about. All we got were, he's evil, he hates your freedom, and he wants to kill you. And we're going to go get him, and we need to fight this war in Afghanistan and blah, 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 and everywhere else in the world. And what was my fucking point? God damn it.
Were you saying that that was what was presented in the media, because I thought that he did have some actual legit messages that said what his grievances were. It just wasn't widely distributed, that information.
Right. So, God damn it. This is like a half-formed thought in my brain. So I'm kind of just free association thinking. But so, yeah, the U.S. media would never really deep dive into what the gripes were of Osama bin Laden were. They would just be like, bad brown man, need to fight. So they would just, whatever his message actually was, didn't matter. They would just use him and then craft a new narrative, their own narrative that suited them better, which is what politicians always do, regardless of, what question you ask of them. They'll just answer the question they want to answer. So why didn't the government, I understand this is a movie, but why didn't the government just switch his message around? Fuck it, let's stop talking about this. I don't even know what I'm talking about. Let's
No, I want to jump off.
You want to jump off it? Jump off it, Daniel. Make some sense out of what that bullshit I was saying.
No, I see some parallels here with the movie and with your Osama bin Laden point. Because if they said what Osama actually said, then it would implicate the United States and the military and all the actions that the media has to cover for, right? All the actions that
they all support. Right,
that they all support, and that the blowback is real, like Ron Paul talks about. So they have to change the message to brown man bad or Middle Eastern man bad. Similarly, and this ties together with my theory at the beginning, where they attack Trump, the media attacks Trump on orange man bad. Orange man did bad things, not on anything he does that's bad that any president would do, right? They can't go after that because that implicates them and their deity of government.
Excellent job tying it all around. I like the way you wrapped that all together, Daniel. That was well done. You took my shit show of a message and turned it into a beautiful swan at the end. Good job.
Well, that's what we do here on The Last Nighters. We take a shit show and turn it into a decent show. In theory, anyway.
Yeah, on paper.
All right. So any last notes or comments before we get into final summaries and reviews here?
I'm looking through my notes. The rest I have, we talked about most of this stuff. Do you guys want to talk about the V stealing the artwork and stuff from the censors? And he's like, well, theft implies ownership. Oh, that was kind of a cute line.
No, yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah, they were not the rightful possessors of that property, of those items. So he was liberating them. He was relieving them from their unjust possessors.
Now, he probably would have been more difficult, but it would have been better if he had actually tried to get those pieces of property back to their legitimate owners. But yeah, I can see why that would be difficult under the world that he lived in.
Right. But this might be a case of right for the wrong reasons, because I could see leftists who identify with this movie saying, oh yeah,
all property is unjustly held.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. So it's like a justification for them to do that.
Right. No, that could be very true. That's why, yeah, maybe ANCOMs really like this movie a lot. I don't know.
Yeah, it seems to be. What do you guys think of the final confrontation with the number 2, lieutenant guy who actually killed the chancellor and then tried to kill V? And there's like a dozen guys all shooting at him, and he says that he'll, if he's still standing, he'll kill them all with just his knives. Because I thought that was kind of corny. It looked cool, like with the knives whipping around, and they would show the little, I don't know, the contrail kind of thing, like with it spinning around. And it's actually related to, they couldn't reload their semi-autos fast enough before he could reach them and kill them with knives. And that's actually a legitimate thing. Like, it's called the Tueller drill. And they measure how far away a knife wielding attacker would need to be from you to be able to draw and fire your weapon to defend yourself. And it's, I think, roughly 30 feet. And my firearms instructor, Masad Ayub, I went to a week-long training with him, and he said, with a firearm, you have a limited number of ammunition, and you have to aim properly. You have to have certain technique, certain speed. But if you have someone who has a knife, they have unlimited ammunition. They can cover distance. They can do, multiple stabbings like very quickly. And, if you compare like a firearm to a knife, the knife can be far more deadly. But then, whenever it's brought up in, like, say, a court case, the gun is always like the most evil thing ever, even though a knife can be far more deadly.
I would tend to agree, although I would say that the knife requires there's a higher skill required to be that deadly, whereas the gun, which is called the great equalizer, is lower skill. Although not to say that there isn't a lot of skill required to operate a handgun also.
Right, and V was very, very highly skilled with those knives.
Yeah, and he also had some kind of they talked about his enhanced kinetics, they said.
Yeah, as a
and
result of his experimentation.
he was also wearing a vest too, some kind of metal vest. But he also had some, enhanced mutation, so he could, take more bullets, and that's why he was able to bounce back and use the knives.
Yeah. What did you guys think about the acting in this movie? Because I liked Hugo Weaving, but I really didn't like Natalie Portman. If you watch it carefully, and I was really getting my judgmental critic eyeballs on, because I don't know if it was the direction, but there were so many times when she would be asked a question and she would immediately answer and just read her line, like just read your line. That's not how people interact with each other. They listen, they consider the question, and then they respond. There's a pause there, but she was just like, I don't know. She seemed very amateurish in this movie. I don't know if anybody else noticed it, but
no, I did not notice that.
One of my gripes.
It might be because you and I talk enough, and I have such a long pause before I respond to the question.
It's true. It takes like 2 seconds for him to think before he talks.
But she was so quick. Yeah. I don't know. I found that, and I'll start summary and review here. The first couple of times I saw this movie back when it came out, I really enjoyed it. And I also remember like being very swayed by things like the Zeitgeist movement and Peter Joseph's eloquent psychobabble, and even being sympathetic to some of the Occupy Wall Street stuff and the messaging from Anonymous, and even Bernie Sanders back when he claimed to be independent, because I think that they do a fair job of identifying problems and showing you that something's wrong. Usually their prescriptions are quite incorrect, but sometimes, maybe even accidentally, sometimes they even get some of the culprits right? Like, those greedy bankers. Well, yeah, I mean, the bankers were doing some shady shit. Granted, a lot of it was related to like perverse incentives and things of that nature. But in my more recent viewing of this, which was just last night, I found that this movie was just not very good. The acting, yeah, like you said, Natalie Portman, pretty wooden, seemed amateurish. Hugo Weaving, it was just over the top for me, like the vanquish the villain in the villainous vanquishing, where, like his entire monologue was, every word was a V. And I know it was supposed to be like, that was intentional, and it was supposed to seem like almost theatrical and Shakespearean in a way. And he would quote Shakespeare a couple of times in the movie, but it just seemed over the top to me and goofy. And then I just got torn up on all the leftist messaging that I see in this thing. So it really fell a little bit flat for me, but I think that's more of a result of two things. One is becoming an ANCAP and having some, principles and grounded beliefs, and then seeing these things for what they are and what their solutions are and how they're wrong. And then the other is looking at it with a critical eye, where, now we're part of doing this show where we are looking at movies of, like, how well is that made? How are they acting? Like, what are some of the goods and the bads about this thing? And looking at it with a critical eye, I think that it does ruin a lot of movies for me that previously I had enjoyed, whether they were well done or not. So unfortunately, I'm going to go below a 5 on this thing. I'm going to go with a 4.5. So Jay, would you like to give us a summary and review with the score 1 through 10, a decimal deep?
Yeah, I want to keep it short. So when I was Googling around for libertarian movies for joining on the show, V for Vendetta was listed as one. And for tonight, I would say V for Vendetta is far from ANCAP libertarian as it can be. And and I do agree with Natalie Portman's role was kind of a little shoddy in this. And I would say, I'm going to go with a 4.9 on the scale.
Some tough reviewers tonight. I like it. I like it when you get a little more critical of these films, even though, it's better than any movie I've ever made. But, still, that's her job. As Dan was saying, I think leftists do a fairly good job of identifying issues, at least as they see it. I don't agree with a lot of their social justice-y stuff. It just comes down to them whining about other people's preferences and that they're not shared preferences. But they also do identify some problems. I believe Joe Rogan likes to call them white blood cells. And I think that's a pretty apt metaphor, where they don't know exactly what the issue is, what the ins and outs and the details, but they go there and they fight the thing that they see is wrong. And Occupy Wall Street and Antifa and those kind of things kind of act in that way. And this movie is similar. I think that it identifies some problems, and I think that they have legitimate gripes. The world they set up is horrific. If I lived in that world, I don't think I would last very long. I would try and escape. My mouth would probably get me killed almost instantly. But, ultimately it's inconsistent. Like we've talked about in this episode, it's, I'm with him on the justice. I'm against him on the revolution. You're just governmenting wrong. There's no such thing as a just government. Any body that initiates aggression on peaceful people isn't going to be a just organization. It's like, would you say the mob is a just organization? Can you take over the mob and turn it into a good organization? So why do you think you can turn government good? It's you're wasting your time. You're wasting everybody else's time and blood and energy with that fantasy fairy tale. So, but I still enjoy the movie. I'm going to give it a more positive score. I think it's still a lot of good sentiment in it, even if it gets a lot of things wrong. And it's a great discussion piece. I really enjoyed the talk tonight. So I'm going to give this a 6.2. Super positive compared to my other reviewers tonight. But yeah, I still think it's got more going on for it than it does against it, even though I think that it ultimately gets the final message wrong. So that's it for me.
All right. Well, very good. Well, thank you for that, Robert. And thank you, Jay, for being a guest. And before we sign off, why don't you let the listeners know where they can find your stuff? And then I will close us out.
Yeah. So AnarchoCoffee.com. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter at AnarchoCoffee. Come check us out. Buy some great coffee.
All right. Well, I might just do that myself. Coming up next week, we're going to be talking with Mance Raider about Dances with Wolves. And
That's awesome.
That's one of his favorite movies. It's one that he brought up. And so we're going to get through that epic marathon of a movie. And there's actually an extended cut of it that's 4 hours long. I might try to watch that. I don't know.
Yeah,
you're probably going to watch it on 2x speed, you son of a bitch.
Yeah, I see me doing that rain dance like super fast.
Yeah, Mance is great. I same thing, kind of reached out to him on Twitter. I was like, hey, I'm doing this. Can I send you a sample of our coffee? I sent him a sample the other day, and hopefully soon he'll be just helping out, get the word out.
Yeah. Well, hey, thank you guys, everyone, for being a listener of The Last Nighters. You can find this on the Launchpad Media, like I was saying. The show notes and more for this episode can be found at lastnighters.com/44. And if you like what we do here, you can support us over at Patreon. We've got various gifts and different goodies available at different price points. And that's at lastnighters.com/Patreon. So I think that's going to do it for tonight. So thanks again, and good night from last night.